Right now, I'm on blood thinning medication because very recently I found out that I have a new blood clot in my leg and a potentially life-threatening one in my lung. I say new because I actually had a blood clot in my leg several years ago too. But at that time, the clot was only in my leg, which is known as a deep vein thrombosis, or DVT. I took blood thinning medication for 3 months and everything had been good since then. But here's what happened this time. I had just gotten back from a family trip in which we took a 5-hour flight to get back home. Now, because I've had a blood clot before, I always try to be really careful when I know I'm going to be sitting down for long periods of time. I took a low-dose aspirin for the flight because I thought that it helps thin out your blood and lowers your risk of clots. I made sure to get up every couple of hours to stretch my legs, and I made it a point to drink water to stay hydrated. Well, I get back home, and so far everything's fine. There's a box that came in the mail that contains some new running shoes that I just ordered, and so the next morning I take them out for a very short run to try to break them in a bit. This is when I first notice a bit of tightness in my legs. I figure this is from the new shoes, still needing a bit more time to get broken in, so I start walking the rest of the way just to make sure that I'm not pushing it too much. Later that night, I'm sitting down watching TV when I notice this very familiar feeling in my leg. The same place that I had a clot in the past. Now, from my personal experiences, the feeling of a blood clot in my leg is very particular and kind of hard to describe. If you've ever been a runner or a cyclist or a swimmer, you've probably had a time when you've had some kind of muscle cramp happen to you. The cramp itself hurts like crazy when your muscle is like locking up and you just have to sit down and massage it until it goes away, and it's just this really painful event. But if you recall, there is a 1 to 2 second little window right before that happens when you haven't felt the pain yet, but there's just this sensation in the muscle that kind of alerts you that a cramp is about to happen. And for me, that's what the sensation of having a blood clot has felt like. Okay, so it's about midnight and I'm starting to get that feeling in my leg and I'm getting a bit worried. Maybe it's just some soreness from the new shoes that I ran in. Maybe it's just a muscle or a tendon issue, but why would it be only affecting my left leg? My mind is going back and forth about whether I should be worried or not, so I barely get any sleep. The next morning I wake up and the feeling is gone. Awesome. Maybe the soreness was from the run and sleeping helped it to recover. I go about my day and feel pretty good physically, but sometimes I think I very faintly feel that sensation again. And I'm still a bit stressed because I've been asking ChatGPT about the differences between a blood clot and something like a muscle or tendon issue, and every answer seems to point me towards a blood clot. But another thing that's super tricky is back when I had the blood clot several years ago, after I had been on medication, everything was stable and I was able to stop taking the blood thinning medication. I had this event at work where I could have sworn that I had another blood clot in my leg because I was sitting in my office chair and I started to have that same feeling in my leg. And I had gone into the hospital, I got blood tests, I spoke to my doctor, and basically what she told me was that there were no indications that I had a blood clot anymore. The blood tests came back fine. And what she boiled it down to was that it was psychological, and basically the anxiety of having gone through the blood clot was causing this to essentially be in my head. And so the next few days go on like this. Relief when everything starts to feel better, but then every once in a while wondering if the feeling is back or if it's just in my imagination. I'm doing research on the internet, trying to find something that will convince me that there's nothing to worry about. And I'm wondering, how much is it going to cost if I actually go to the emergency room and get tests done? And so finally, after about a week of this, I tell myself that I can't keep playing this game with something potentially this dangerous, so I'll just bite the bullet and I'll go visit the emergency room the next day. So I go to the ER and they do an ultrasound test. Just like last time, all of the medical staff is telling me that they're surprised to see me in there for a potential blood clot because I'm young and I look fit and healthy, and usually people that are susceptible to blood clots are women that are pregnant or someone that just recently had surgery. But also, just like last time, the doctor comes into the room after all the tests are done and tells me that they did indeed find a blood clot in one of the two deep veins in my left leg. Now, the last time I had a blood clot, I was given a prescription for two types of blood thinning medication. The first was a set of 5 needles and syringes with a blood thinner called Lovenox. This is something that you have to inject yourself at home into the stomach area. Now, obviously, it's not fun to have to give yourself an injection every day, but the reason they do this is because this particular blood thinning medication works a lot quicker and is a lot stronger, and so it's used to start this medication regimen so that they can ensure that the blood clot is stable, it's not going to break off, and it's not going to grow. The second set of medication that I received was a set of pills called Pradaxa. But this time around, I did not get the injections. I was only given a prescription for a new set of pills called Eliquis. So I go home, obviously very worried about the whole situation, but glad that I took myself in to get checked out after all, and glad that I now know what I need to do in order to recover. But here's where the story takes a turn. So it's 3 days in, and I'm taking the pills just like I'm supposed to. And one night I'm lying in bed, just on my phone, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get this lightheadedness and this weird, uneasy feeling in my body. Again, the annoying thing is that it's not obvious. It's not painful. I'm not having trouble breathing or coughing up blood, which are all symptoms of something that's very dangerous and life-threatening called a pulmonary embolism, in which the blood clot breaks out of the spot that it's in your leg and travels up into your lungs. No, it's very subtle, and once again, I'm left lying there trying to both be critical and observant and vigilant about what's happening, and at the same time, I'm trying to be calm and relaxed and clear-headed. So for the next 20 minutes, this subtle, uneasy feeling in my head kind of comes and goes, and I'm thinking to myself, dang, like, is this really an emergency? Do I really need to check myself into the ER at 2 in the morning? But after staying with this question for a few more minutes, the thought of just trying to sleep on it for 8 hours during the night seems like a bad idea. And so I go back to the ER. Now at this point, I already have a DVT and I'm already on blood thinning medication. So the next test that they do is a CT scan, in which they inject you with this colored dye and then put you in this machine so that they can take images of your blood vessels. After a very long wait, the doctor comes in and tells me that they did find a blood clot in my right lung, and so they give me an injection of Lovenox and tell me that I'll need to stay in the hospital overnight. They give me a hospital gown to wear and wheel me off to the 6th floor. I don't sleep at all that night, and in the early morning hours, they do 3 more tests. An EKG to see if the blood clot in my lungs is causing any kind of backup and stress and strain on my heart. The second one is a CT scan of my head, in which I go back into that same machine, but this time they're looking to see if there's any clots in my brain. And the third is another set of blood tests that are checking to see if there's any kind of genetic factors that are causing all of this. And it's that third test that is really revealing, because I don't understand all of the details of it, but essentially they found that there is in fact a genetic factor that's making it so that either my body has a difficult time breaking up clots, or it's just more susceptible to clots forming in the first place. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned to you yet is that all of this is taking place just a few days before I'm supposed to be traveling. I already have my flight booked, I have my place to stay, my girlfriend is coming from Europe to come to LA, and then we're gonna fly together. All of this stuff is booked already. So I asked my doctor, since I'm already on the blood thinning medication, and the treatment for the DVT and the pulmonary embolism is the same, I asked 2 doctors actually, if it would be okay and safe for me to travel and be in that destination for a month. Both of them say that it's fine because the treatment is the same, but there's one small worry. And that is that when I came back to the emergency room for the second time, it was after I had already started taking the Eliquis pills, right? And so there was a very small chance that the reason the DVT emerged as a pulmonary embolism was because even though I was taking the blood thinning medication, maybe my body has some kind of resistance to it. And so we all agreed that the safest thing to do, the thing that would eliminate the most variables, would be to, instead of taking the pills, take a 30-day supply of Lovenox injections. The downside is that instead of the convenience of simply taking a pill every day, I was given a prescription for 90 injections, which means I had to shove a needle into my stomach twice a day for over a month. Not my idea of a good time. And so, here we are. It's been about a month since everything happened, and the first days that I arrived at my destination were a bit stressful, just, worrying about what would happen if I started coughing up blood or something, and realizing only at that point that where I was staying on this little off-the-grid farm was actually like 40 minutes away from the nearest emergency room instead of the 10 minutes it takes back home. But that place was also incredibly healing. After getting through that initial bout of stress, I realized that the land, the surrounding nature, all the greenery, the sounds of frogs at night and birds in the morning, the organic, locally grown food, the fresh air, and the super clean water, all of this had been super therapeutic. And because it's off the grid with limited Wi-Fi and electricity, I spent less time on my phone and more time taking walks in nature, writing in my journal, and reading. And lastly, having this health scare, thinking about the possibility of dying in my 30s, and then taking a peaceful dip in the ocean or looking out at a cascading waterfall was almost a kind of spiritual experience. Even now, as I make this video, I'm still being treated for the clot, which means that the ordeal is not over yet. And it's a little bit weird to be talking about something that's potentially life-threatening while it's still happening. But I wanted to share this experience while it was happening because after I had made the videos about the previous blood clot several years back, I realized that there are a surprisingly large amount of people out there that have had a clot in the past or are currently dealing with one now, both young and old. And so the videos that I made kind of helped to provide a little bit of relief or a sense of being heard. And so, click here if you want to hear about the story of my blood clot back in 2017, and click here if you want to learn more about the beautiful place that I stayed at recently in order to heal.